Think you know everything about the iconic Love Jones? From a director who worked on Jerry Springer to a famous poem written by someone you've never heard of and a fog-ruined fountain scene that became fans' favorite moment, this romantic cult classic hides secrets that will change how you watch Darius and Nina's love story forever. Fact 1. The director was only 24 and a Jerry Springer PA. When Love Jones hit theaters in 1997, audiences fell in love with its sophisticated portrayal of black romance and Chicago's poetry scene. But almost nobody knew that the man behind the camera was barely old enough to rent a car. Theodore Witcher was just 24 years old when he directed this cult classic, making him one of the youngest African-American directors to helm a major studio film at the time. But here's where it gets even weirder. Just a few years before sitting in the director's chair, Witcher was working as a security guard at a Chicago television station and doing production assistant work on The Jerry Springer Show, which was about as far from sophisticated romantic cinema as you could possibly get. The contrast couldn't be more stark. One day he's dealing with the chaos of daytime talk show drama, and not long after, he's crafting one of the most iconic romantic films of the 90s. Witcher had written the screenplay for Love Jones while he was still in film school at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, pouring his observations about Chicago's arts community and his own romantic experiences into the script. His youth and fresh perspective actually worked in the film's favor, bringing an authentic energy to the story that resonated with young black professionals who rarely saw themselves portrayed on screen with such nuance and intelligence. The film's success proved that age and a glamorous resume weren't prerequisites for creating something culturally significant, though it makes you wonder what might have happened if Hollywood had given this young talent more opportunities to direct after his remarkable debut. Fact 2, it's Witcher's only feature film, nearly 30 years later. Here's one of the most baffling mysteries in film history. Theodore Witcher created a movie that would become a defining romantic classic for an entire generation, won awards at Sundance, and established a devoted cult following that only grew stronger over the decades. Yet he never directed another feature film. Nearly 30 years have passed since Love Jones premiered, and Witcher's directorial filmography remains frozen at exactly one movie. This isn't a case where the director made a flop and couldn't get another chance. Love Jones was critically praised and became more beloved with each passing year, regularly appearing on lists of the greatest romantic films and, most important, black cinema. So what happened? The reasons are complicated and reflect some of the harsh realities of Hollywood. After Love Jones, Witcher did try to develop other projects, but getting financing and studio backing proved incredibly difficult. He directed some television episodes and worked on various projects in development, but nothing ever made it to the big screen. Part of the problem was that Love Jones didn't make huge money at the box office. It grossed about $12 million against a $10 million budget. So studios weren't convinced Witcher could deliver a commercial hit, even though the film found its audience through word of mouth and home video. The industry also has a long history of not giving black directors second chances the way white directors often receive multiple opportunities despite failures. It's a tragic waste of talent that the man who created such an influential and enduring film never got the chance to show what else he could do behind the camera. Fact 3. Nina's role was written for Jada Pinkett Smith. When Theodore Witcher sat down to write Love Jones, he had a very specific actress in mind for the role of Nina Mosley, the beautiful photographer who captures Darius Lovehall's heart, Jada Pinkett Smith. At the time, Pinkett Smith was already establishing herself as a talented actress, with roles in films like The Nutty Professor and Set It Off, and Witcher believed she embodied exactly what he envisioned for Nina: intelligent, artistic, independent, and captivatingly beautiful. The character was crafted with her voice, mannerisms, and presence in mind, which makes it all the more interesting that she ultimately passed on the role. Pinkett Smith did read the script and reportedly liked it quite a bit, appreciating Witcher's portrayal of black romance and culture, but for reasons that have never been fully explained publicly, she decided not to take the part. Some reports suggest scheduling conflicts, while others hint that she might have had concerns about the film's small budget or limited distribution prospects since it was coming from a first-time director. Whatever the reason, her decision opened the door for Nia Long to step into the role, and it's impossible to imagine Love Jones without Long's performance now. Long brought her own warmth, vulnerability, and strength to Nina, creating a chemistry with Lawrence Tate that became legendary. While Pinkett Smith went on to have a successful career and would later play memorable romantic roles in other films, fans of Love Jones often wonder how different the movie might have felt with her in the lead, though most agree that Long made the character completely her own. Fact 4. The Sanctuary Club doesn't actually exist. If you've ever been inspired by Love Jones to visit Chicago and find the Sanctuary, the sultry poetry club, where Darius first locks eyes with Nina and delivers his unforgettable poem, I Have Some Disappointing News. The venue never actually existed, as shown in the film. The Sanctuary nightclub was completely fictional, created through movie magic by combining two entirely different Chicago locations. The exterior shots that show characters arriving at the club were filmed at one building, while the warm, intimate interior where all the poetry performances and romantic moments happen was actually shot inside a church on a completely different street. This kind of location trickery is common in filmmaking, but it's particularly interesting for Love Jones because the Sanctuary became such an iconic symbol of Black cultural spaces and artistic community that many people assumed it must have been based on a real venue. In reality, while Chicago did have poetry spots and cultural centers during the 90s that inspired Witcher's vision, no single location matched what he wanted to create on screen. The film's production designers built out the church interior to transform it into the perfect moody, candlelit poetry club atmosphere, adding the bar, the small stage, and all the intimate seating areas. The deception worked so well that for years after the movie's release, tourists and fans would try to find the Sanctuary in Chicago, disappointed to discover that the perfect date spot where Darius and Nina fell in love existed only on film, though the movie did inspire some real Chicago venues to recreate elements of that aesthetic. Fact 5. The studio demanded a rain scene reshoot over hair concerns. One of the most romantic moments in Love, Jones shows Nina standing in the rain waiting for Darius, water streaming down her face as they finally reconcile. But this scene almost didn't happen the way we know it. And the reason why reveals a fascinating behind-the-scenes clash between artistic vision and cultural authenticity. When test audiences first watched the film, Black women in particular voiced a very specific complaint. No Black woman in her right mind would stand outside in the pouring rain without protecting her hair. For anyone unfamiliar with Black hair care, this might seem like a minor detail, but moisture management is actually a serious consideration because of how water affects different hair textures, especially when hair has been straightened or specially styled. The studio took this feedback seriously and insisted that director Theodore Witcher reshoot the scene, which absolutely mortified him. Witcher had envisioned this rain-soaked romantic moment as the emotional climax of the film, and being told to change it felt like his artistic vision was being questioned and undermined. The solution was to move the scene to underneath an L train track, where Nina could wait for Darius while staying mostly protected from the rain, only getting slightly wet in a way that felt more realistic for the character. This compromise satisfied the audience's concerns about authenticity while still preserving some of the romantic atmosphere Witcher wanted. The fact that the studio was willing to spend money on reshoots based on this culturally specific feedback actually shows a level of attention to Black women's perspectives that wasn't always common in Hollywood productions, even if it frustrated the young director who had to watch his original vision get altered. Fact 6. The famous Buckingham Fountain scene was ruined by fog. There's a gorgeous scene in Love Jones where Darius and Nina share an intimate moment at Chicago's iconic Buckingham Fountain, and fans of the movie often describe it as having this dreamy, ethereal quality with a soft, glowing atmosphere that perfectly captures the romance of their relationship. What those fans don't know is that the director absolutely hated how that scene turned out, and the ethereal glow everyone loves was actually the result of a filming disaster. When the production team arrived to shoot at Buckingham Fountain, which is one of Chicago's most recognizable landmarks, they encountered heavy fog that rolled in and completely obscured the visibility. For Theodore Witcher, this was a nightmare scenario. He had planned for crisp, clear shots that would showcase the fountain's beauty and create a specific visual mood, but instead, Everything was shrouded in this thick fog that made it difficult to see much of anything beyond a few feet. Witcher was frustrated and disappointed with the footage, feeling like weather had ruined what should have been one of the film's most beautiful sequences. But when audiences saw the finished film, they had the complete opposite reaction. That fog created an accidental romantic haze that made the scene feel more intimate and dreamlike, as if Darius and Nina existed in their own private world, separate from reality. The soft, diffused lighting that the fog created gave everything an almost magical quality that enhanced the emotional connection between the characters rather than distracting from it. It's a perfect example of how sometimes what filmmakers consider mistakes or failures can actually become the moments that audiences treasure most, and how you can't always predict what will resonate with viewers. Fact 7. Nia Long wrapped herself in garbage bags between takes. Making movies often involves enduring uncomfortable conditions for the sake of art, but Nia Long's experience filming the rain scenes for Love Jones took physical discomfort to a whole new level of unglamorous survival tactics. Chicago weather is notoriously brutal, and filming in the rain during cold conditions meant Long was repeatedly getting soaked and then having to stand around in wet clothes while the crew set up the next shot, adjusted lighting, or dealt with technical issues. Between takes, when the cameras weren't rolling, Long came up with a decidedly unromantic solution to stay warm and protect herself from hypothermia. She wrapped her entire body in plastic garbage bags. This makeshift protective gear wasn't some fancy movie set accommodation. We're talking about actual trash bags that she'd pull over herself like a cocoon, trapping whatever body heat she could preserve and keeping her somewhat dry when she wasn't actively filming. The contrast between what audiences see on screen and what was happening behind the scenes couldn't be more stark. While the finished film shows Nina looking beautiful and vulnerable in the rain, the reality involved a shivering actress covered in garbage bags, desperately trying to stay warm enough to continue working. Long never complained publicly about these conditions, maintaining her professionalism throughout the shoot, but the garbage bag detail reveals just how much physical sacrifice actors sometimes make for those perfect romantic movie moments. It's also a reminder that big-budget Hollywood films have resources for heated trailers and warming tents. But smaller independent productions like Love Jones often required everyone to get creative and endure less than ideal working conditions to bring the story to life on a limited budget. Fact 8. The famous poem was written by a real Chicago poet. When Lawrence Tate's character Darius Lovehall steps onto the sanctuary stage and delivers that unforgettable poem, Brother to the Night, a blues for Nina, that makes Nina and every woman in the audience fall for him instantly, most viewers assume those words came from the mind of screenwriter and director Theodore Witcher. But here's the truth. Witcher didn't write that iconic poem at all. The actual author was Reggie Gibson, a real Chicago poet who was deeply embedded in the city's spoken word scene during the 90s. Gibson wasn't just some hired writer brought in to add authenticity. He actually appears in the film itself as one of the poets performing at the sanctuary, blending seamlessly into the world that Witcher created because he genuinely belonged to that community in real life. Witcher knew he needed authentic poetry that would sound like it came from Chicago's actual art scene, rather than Hollywood's imagination of what black poetry should sound like. So he turned to Gibson, who was already making waves in the spoken word world. The poem Gibson created for Darius perfectly captured that smooth, seductive, intellectually playful style that defined 90s spoken word poetry, with its jazz-influenced rhythms and romantic imagery. After Love Jones came out, Gibson's career continued to flourish. He went on to become a National Poetry Slam champion, proving that his talent was genuine and not just lucky timing. It's fascinating that the words which became so closely associated with the film and which countless people tried to memorize and recite to impress their own romantic interests were actually written by someone most audience members never knew existed, performing right there on screen in plain sight. Fact 9. Nina's poems are from a real acclaimed poet. Just like Darius's famous poem came from a real Chicago poet, the verses that Nina Mosley recites in the film weren't created by Theodore Witcher either. They came from the pen of Sonia Sanchez, one of the most important and celebrated poets of the 20th century. Sanchez is a legendary figure in American literature, a pioneer of the black arts movement who has published numerous collections and won major awards including the Robert Frost Medal and the Langston Hughes Poetry Award. So having her words in the film added a level of literary credibility that went beyond what most romantic movies even attempt. Witcher specifically chose 2 poems from Sanchez's book, Like the Singing Coming Off the Drums, love poems, for Nia Long to perform as Nina, selecting pieces that would showcase Nina's intelligence, sensitivity, and artistic sophistication. This decision to use real acclaimed poetry for both main characters rather than writing original verses or using generic romantic poetry was crucial to making Love Jones feel authentic to people who actually participated in poetry scenes and cultural spaces. Sanchez's work carries weight and depth that audiences could feel, even if they didn't know who wrote it, adding layers of meaning to Nina's character and showing that she wasn't just a pretty face, but a serious artist in her own right. The fact that both Darius and Nina were given words written by actual respected poets rather than Hollywood scriptwriters demonstrates Witcher's commitment to cultural authenticity and his respect for the black literary tradition, even though it meant giving credit and attention to artists outside the film industry who most moviegoers would never know about or research. Fact 10. Lauryn Hill almost starred but gave a song. Instead, in one of the most interesting what-if casting scenarios in Love Jones history, Lauryn Hill was actually considered for a role in the film during its development, which would have been fascinating given that she was at the peak of her powers with the Fugees at the time. While the exact role Hill was being considered for isn't completely clear from available records, some sources suggest it might have been Nina, while others indicate it could have been a supporting character. What we know for certain is that Hill couldn't commit to the project because the Fugees were in the middle of their massive touring schedule following the success of their album, The Score. Being on the road constantly with one of the biggest hip-hop groups in the world didn't leave room for film shoots, so Hill had to pass on whatever involvement had been discussed. But here's where the story gets better. Hill didn't just disappear from the project completely. While she was traveling on the Fugees tour bus, she watched an early cut or screener of Love Jones, and the film moved her so much that she decided to contribute in a different way. She recorded The Sweetest Thing specifically for the Love Jones soundtrack, giving the film one of its most beautiful and memorable musical moments, even though she never appeared on screen. This song became one of the soundtrack's standout tracks and helped establish the album's success, proving that sometimes when one door closes, another opens in an even better way. The fact that Hill took time during her incredibly busy touring schedule to watch the film and then create original music for it shows how much the project resonated with her, and her contribution helped Love Jones reach audiences who might not have otherwise discovered it. Fact 11. The soundtrack outperformed the film commercially. When you look at the commercial performance of Love Jones, you discover a fascinating contradiction. The movie itself was barely profitable at the box office, but the soundtrack became a genuine hit that far exceeded the film's financial success. Love Jones grossed approximately $12 million during its theatrical run against a production budget of about $10 million, which meant that after marketing costs and theater splits were factored in, the film didn't make much money for the studio at all. By Hollywood standards, it was basically a break-even situation at best. But the Love Jones soundtrack told a completely different story. The album climbed to number 16 on the Billboard 200 chart, which tracks overall album sales across all genres, and reached an even more impressive number 3 position on the R&B and hip-hop albums chart. This kind of soundtrack success without corresponding box office numbers was relatively unusual. Typically, soundtracks perform well when the movie is a massive hit, but Love Jones flipped that formula. The soundtrack featured an incredible collection of artists including Lauryn Hill, Dionne Farris, Duke Ellington, Cassandra Wilson, and others, creating a musical landscape that captured the film's sophisticated, jazz-influenced aesthetic perfectly. Many people bought the album who never saw the movie in theaters, drawn by the artists involved or by hearing singles on the radio. The soundtrack's success actually helped the film find its audience after the theatrical release, as people who loved the music became curious about the movie and sought it out on video. It's a reminder that a film's cultural impact and financial success can be measured in multiple ways, and sometimes the ancillary products end up mattering more than the box office numbers suggest. Fact 12. It tied for Sundance's Audience Award. Love Jones had its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival in January of 1997, which was a significant moment for the film because Sundance had become the most important launching pad for independent cinema in America. What happened at that festival was pretty remarkable. Love Jones tied for the Audience Award with another film called Hurricane Streets, which was a rare occurrence since the award usually goes to a single clear winner. The Audience Award at Sundance is voted on by festival goers rather than critics or industry judges, so it reflects what regular moviegoers actually responded to emotionally. And it's often seen as a strong predictor of which films will successfully cross over from the independent circuit to mainstream commercial success. Winning or sharing this award meant that Love Jones had connected with audiences in a powerful way, generating the kind of word-of-mouth excitement that studios dream about. The tie with Hurricane Streets is interesting because that film, directed by Morgan J. Freeman and starring Brendan Sexton III, was a gritty drama about teenage criminals in New York, completely different in tone and subject matter from Love Jones's romantic Chicago poetry scene. The fact that these two totally different films both resonated enough with Sundance audiences to share the top prize shows the range of stories that independent cinema was telling in the 90s. While Hurricane Streets faded from cultural memory fairly quickly, despite its Sundance success, Love Jones went on to become a cult classic that people still watch and quote decades later, proving that sometimes the long-term impact of a film can't be predicted even by prestigious festival awards. Fact 13. Lisa Nicole Carson improvised her scenes with Nia Long. Lisa Nicole Carson, who played Josie Nichols, Nina's loyal and outspoken best friend in Love Jones, brought such natural chemistry and authentic girlfriend energy to her scenes that it's surprising to learn much of it wasn't actually scripted. Carson revealed in interviews that many of her scenes with Nia Long were improvised during filming, with the two actresses riffing off each other and creating dialogue that felt genuine to how black women actually talk to their friends rather than sticking rigidly to what was written on the page. This improvisation worked because Carson and Long developed a real rapport during production, and director Theodore Witcher was smart enough to recognize when what they were creating spontaneously was better than what he'd written. The friendship between Nina and Josie is crucial to the film because it grounds Nina's romantic journey in a believable female friendship where they can be honest, vulnerable, and occasionally call each other out when needed. Those moments where Josie is giving Nina advice about Darius or questioning her decisions feel so authentic, partly because Carson and Long were allowed the freedom to find the truth of those conversations themselves, rather than just reciting memorized lines. Carson was coming off her success on the television show ER when she filmed Love Jones, and she brought that same naturalistic acting style to the role of Josie. The fact that so much of her performance was improvised speaks to both her talent and to Witcher's willingness as a young director to let his actors explore and contribute creatively, trusting that their instincts might sometimes be better than his script. Fact 14. The film was loosely based on Witcher's real dating life. When Theodore Witcher wrote the screenplay for Love Jones, he wasn't just imagining what romance might look like in Chicago's arts community. He was drawing directly from his own personal experiences navigating that exact world. Witcher has confirmed in interviews that the story was loosely autobiographical, based on his time hanging around Chicago's poetry scene and cultural spaces where young black artists, writers, and intellectuals would gather to perform, socialize, and yes, attempt to date each other. In describing what inspired the film's central conflict about emotional games and romantic miscommunication, Witcher noted that there was a lot of game playing going on in that scene, with people protecting themselves emotionally while simultaneously trying to connect, performing coolness and intellectual sophistication while hiding their vulnerabilities. That push and pull between wanting intimacy and fearing it, between being genuine and performing, became the emotional engine that drives Darius and Nina's relationship throughout the film. Witcher understood this dynamic so well because he'd lived it himself, watching the elaborate dances that people did around their feelings while pretending everything was casual and cool. The authenticity of Love Jones, the reason it resonated so strongly with audiences who recognized themselves in these characters, came from Witcher's willingness to examine his own romantic failures and successes with honesty. He took the specific details of his life in Chicago during the early 90s and transformed them into something universal that spoke to anyone who'd ever struggled with being vulnerable in relationships, which is part of why the film has endured for so long beyond its original cultural moment. Fact 15, the film sparked a nationwide spoken word poetry. Boom after Love Jones premiered in March of 1997, something unexpected happened across America. Poetry, open mics, and spoken word events exploded in popularity, especially in urban areas with significant black populations. Young people who watched Darius Lovehall smooth talk his way into Nina's heart with Brother to the Night suddenly wanted to try their hand at poetry, seeing it as both an artistic outlet and a potentially effective way to attract romantic attention. Poetry venues that had existed quietly for years suddenly found themselves packed with newcomers eager to perform, and new open mic nights started appearing at coffee shops, bars, and cultural centers in cities nationwide. This boom in spoken word poetry was directly attributable to Love Jones, making poetry look cool, romantic, and culturally relevant in a way that mainstream culture hadn't presented it before, especially for young black audiences. People started showing up at open mics specifically trying to emulate Darius's style, that smooth, jazz-influenced, romantically charged delivery that Lawrence Tate made look effortless on screen. Here's the ironic twist, though. As the spoken word scene grew and matured over the following years, many poets and critics began pointing out that the famous Brother to the Night poem, while effective in the film's context, isn't actually that great from a pure poetry standpoint. Some have critiqued its somewhat cliched imagery and overly smooth delivery, noting that real spoken word poetry, at its best, is often rawer and more challenging than Darius's crowd-pleasing performance. Regardless of these later critiques, Love Jones's impact on poetry culture is undeniable. It introduced an entire generation to spoken word and inspired countless people to pick up pens and microphones, even if they eventually developed beyond the style the film popularized.